There are places on Earth where science insists almost nothing ever existed beyond ice, wind, and silence. But what if that silence is hiding one of history's greatest omissions? For centuries, ancient maps displayed lands, structures, and names that have since vanished from official records. Among them, one name continues to provoke uncomfortable questions: Tartary. A vast territory associated with monumental constructions, impossible cities, and a past that seems to have been deliberately erased. Now imagine if part of that disappearance was not merely geographic, but frozen beneath another name: Antarctica. For generations, Antarctica has been presented as an isolated continent, extreme, inaccessible, and inhospitable, a frozen desert where no civilization could ever have flourished. But some ancient documents challenge that narrative. Long before modern expeditions officially reached the southern continent, certain maps already showed landmasses in the far south, with details that remain difficult to explain. Coastlines, proportions, and contours that, according to independent researchers, appear far too precise for the knowledge officially available at the time. Among these documents, one of the most frequently discussed is the map created by Piri Reis in the 16th century. What makes it extraordinary is not only its remarkable oceanic accuracy, but the appearance of a southern land that some believe resembles the Antarctic coastline, possibly without ice, centuries before Antarctica's official modern discovery. Conventional historians argue that these outlines may simply reflect distortions, fragments of other coastlines, or cartographic speculation. Yet even those explanations have never completely silenced the fascination surrounding it. Because if these maps were based on older sources, as Piri Reis himself claimed, then a deeper question emerges. Who created those earlier records? And how did they possess information that seems impossible for their era? That is where Tartary enters the discussion with unsettling force. For centuries, the word Tartary appeared across maps covering immense portions of northern Asia, stretching across regions now divided into multiple modern countries. Official history describes it as a broad label Europeans used for vast territories inhabited by diverse peoples they did not fully understand. But for many alternative researchers, that explanation feels incomplete. They point to architectural similarities scattered across continents: massive stone buildings, domes, columns, arches, and engineering methods that seem strangely unified despite enormous distances. The argument is not merely that Tartary existed as a geographical label, but that it may have represented a forgotten system of civilization whose traces were later absorbed, renamed, or destroyed. Cities with giant structures appear in 19th century photographs looking far too monumental for the populations officially said to have built them at that stage of development. Entire urban centers emerged with astonishing speed and records, often already equipped with sophisticated public buildings, advanced symmetry, and enormous infrastructure. Then another strange pattern appears: fires, demolitions, resets. Across different continents, records from the 19th century repeatedly describe devastating urban fires that erased enormous portions of major cities. Chicago, San Francisco, and many others suffered destruction, followed by rapid rebuilding. Officially, these were tragic but explainable disasters of industrializing societies. Yet in alternative narratives, these fires are viewed as part of a larger global reset, a period when previous structures were erased, repurposed, or hidden beneath new historical narratives. And if a civilization could disappear from populated continents, some ask whether its most inaccessible remnants would survive where few could reach them. That idea gives Antarctica a new and controversial role. Satellite imagery, restricted zones, military treaties, and the continent's severe limitations on access have fueled speculation for decades. Why is such a massive territory governed under unusually strict international agreements? Why do certain areas remain inaccessible except under controlled scientific permission? Officially, the answer is environmental protection, scientific cooperation, and preservation of fragile ecosystems. But for those who distrust official explanations, Antarctica becomes something else entirely: a sealed archive. The mystery deepens when older maps are examined beside modern polar data. Some enthusiasts argue that beneath kilometers of ice there may be mountain systems, subglacial lakes, and land formations capable of preserving ancient anomalies. Modern science openly confirms that Antarctica hides vast landscapes under ice. Mountain ranges, rivers, volcanic activity, and even enormous lakes trapped beneath frozen layers for millions of years. But for alternative researchers, these confirmed facts become fuel for larger theories. If entire hidden landscapes exist, why not hidden ruins? The most dramatic interpretation suggests that what is now covered by ice may once have been habitable under very different climate conditions. Geological history confirms Earth has undergone immense climatic shifts, including periods when Antarctica supported forests millions of years ago. Fossils prove that life once flourished there under radically different temperatures. Official science places that era far beyond human civilization. Yet those who connect Tartary to Antarctica argue that perhaps some chapter of recent history has been compressed, misdated, or omitted altogether. This is where the line between evidence and speculation becomes dangerously thin, and exactly where fascination grows strongest. Because history has a pattern. The less accessible a place becomes, the more powerful the stories surrounding it become. Antarctica is not merely remote, it is psychologically distant. Few people will ever see it. Fewer still will enter its restricted scientific zones. And when a place becomes unreachable, imagination fills every empty space left behind by official silence. Ancient maps, erased empires, impossible architecture, and a frozen continent at the edge of the world begin to merge into one irresistible question. What if the disappearance of Tartary was not only political but geographic? Then the discussion moves from maps to something even more unsettling: architecture that appears where, according to official timelines, it should not exist with such scale, symmetry, and technical maturity. Across multiple continents, enormous stone buildings emerged in cities that were supposedly still developing basic infrastructure. Massive domes, colossal columns, elaborate facades, and public structures designed with a precision that often seems disconnected from the populations officially credited with constructing them. In old photographs, entire avenues appear lined with monumental buildings before modern machinery had fully spread across those regions. To conventional historians, this is simply the result of industrial ambition, imported engineering, and rapid 19th century development. But to those who see Tartary as more than a forgotten map label, these cities look less like beginnings and more like inheritances. What draws attention is not just the size of these structures, but their repetition. Similar design patterns appear in distant places with no obvious cultural continuity. Arches, domes, towers, and geometric proportions that seem to obey a hidden visual language. Buildings in St. Petersburg, Paris, Buenos Aires, and New York City often enter these comparisons because they suggest a level of urban monumentalism appearing almost simultaneously across the world. Official explanations attribute this to neoclassical influence spreading through empire, trade, and education. Alternative interpretations ask a different question. What if those styles were not merely copied, but inherited from a pre-existing global standard whose origins are now obscured? Old world fairs intensify this suspicion. During the 19th and early 20th centuries, enormous temporary cities appeared for international exhibitions, entire complexes built with astonishing speed, often containing giant palaces, domes, sculptures, waterways, electrical systems, and monumental halls. After attracting millions of visitors, many of these structures were demolished, burned, or dismantled within a short time. Official records describe them as temporary constructions using staff, plaster, timber, and steel frameworks. But critics find that explanation difficult to reconcile with the visual scale shown in photographs. The world's Columbian Exposition is constantly cited in these discussions. Images show a vast white city rising with impossible elegance in a remarkably short period. Officially, it was a triumph of engineering and organization, but those who connect such events to Tartary argue that some of these structures may not have been built from nothing, that they may have reused older foundations, hidden earlier systems, or even showcased fragments of architecture inherited from a forgotten era before being removed from public view. Then another detail emerges: windows buried below ground level. In countless historic buildings across Europe, North America, and parts of Asia, Lower floors appear partially submerged beneath present street level. Entire rows of windows begin below pavement height, as if the buildings had sunk or as if the ground itself had risen. Official explanations usually involve street elevation projects, flood control, urban redesign, and natural accumulation over time. Cities evolve, roads rise, foundations shift. Yet alternative researchers interpret these buried floors differently. Evidence of a vast mud event, a global deposition layer, or a civilizational reset that physically buried parts of an earlier world. This is where the theory begins to connect even more strongly with Antarctica. Because if parts of one civilization were buried under soil in populated regions, then under polar ice, preservation could be even more dramatic. Ice does not merely conceal, it seals. Under immense pressure, beneath kilometers of frozen mass, entire landscapes can remain hidden for ages. Modern radar has already revealed mountain chains, deep valleys, liquid lakes, and volcanic systems beneath Antarctic ice. Subglacial lake discoveries transformed scientific understanding of the continent, proving that Antarctica is far more geologically dynamic than once imagined. One of the most discussed examples is Lake Vostok, buried beneath nearly 4 kilometers of ice. Isolated for immense spans of time, it became one of the most extreme hidden environments ever studied. To science, it offers clues about microbial survival and planetary history. To theorists, it proves something else. Vast hidden spaces exist under the ice, and humanity has only touched the surface of what lies below. Then there are the mountain anomalies visible through ice-penetrating surveys. Certain formations appear natural, yet their symmetry fuels endless speculation online. Every angular ridge, every shadowed contour, every isolated peak becomes a possible structure in the eyes of those searching for lost civilizations. Some images circulate claiming pyramids exist beneath Antarctic snow. Scientists explain them as nunataks, mountain peaks protruding through ice, shaped naturally through erosion and glacial pressure. Yet the visual resemblance is powerful enough that the idea refuses to disappear. And once pyramids enter the conversation, Tartary returns immediately. Because Tartary theories often depend on the belief that a single forgotten civilizational pattern once extended across multiple continents, leaving traces in architecture, geometry, and urban layout. If similar monumental forms appear worldwide, Antarctica becomes the ultimate missing piece, the untouched archive where the final remnants may still survive. But Antarctica's modern political status adds another layer of fascination. The Antarctic Treaty froze territorial claims and established the continent primarily for peaceful scientific use. Military activity is restricted, resource exploitation tightly controlled, and access limited through complex regulation. Officially, this is one of humanity's rare cooperative achievements, protecting a fragile environment from geopolitical conflict. Yet to conspiracy-minded observers, the treaty sounds suspiciously like coordinated exclusion. Why do so many nations agree so firmly on protecting one continent? Why is independent movement there so difficult? Why do certain regions require special authorization beyond standard expedition logistics? In reality, the answers are practical: extreme danger, environmental risk, and the cost of survival in one of Earth's harshest climates. But where information is technical, mystery often becomes louder than explanation. That is why Antarctica attracts theories unlike any other place on Earth. It is remote enough to resist ordinary verification, scientific enough to feel guarded, and visually empty enough to invite projection. In that emptiness, Tartary becomes not just a lost empire, but a possible answer to everything that seems missing. Yet one question remains unavoidable. If Tartary was truly erased, why do official records still contain its name for centuries? And the answer may be stranger than either side expects. In the end, what keeps the possible connection between Tartary and Antarctica alive is not the existence of definitive proof, but the persistence of questions that official explanations do not completely silence for everyone who studies these theories. Ancient maps continue to circulate, showing territories and coastlines that many believe deserve deeper interpretation. The repeated appearance of Tartary across centuries of cartography still causes debate. especially because such a vast name gradually disappeared as modern borders became more precise. At the same time, Antarctica remains one of the least accessible places on Earth, a continent where enormous landscapes still lie hidden beneath layers of ice that preserve secrets from ages far older than recorded human history. Official historical interpretation presents Tartary as a broad geographical term used by European cartographers to describe immense regions of northern Asia that were not yet politically understood in detail. In the same way, modern science explains Antarctica through geology, climate evolution, and long natural processes that transformed the southern continent over millions of years. These explanations are supported by accepted research, documented expeditions, and scientific studies. Yet despite that, theories connecting both subjects continue to attract attention because they touch something deeper: the human tendency to question what seems incomplete, forgotten, or too distant to verify personally. Part of that fascination also comes from architecture, from old photographs, from cities that appear monumental even in periods when technology seems, at first glance, less advanced than the structures themselves suggest. For some observers, these buildings represent nothing more than engineering ambition and the rapid growth of industrial societies. For others, they raise doubts about whether parts of history were inherited rather than fully built within the timelines commonly accepted today. When those doubts are added to old maps and to a continent like Antarctica, the result becomes a theory that feels larger than geography alone. Antarctica strengthens that imagination because it remains physically beyond ordinary reach. Beneath its frozen surface exist mountain ranges, deep valleys, subglacial lakes, and geological formations that even today continue to be studied with advanced technology. Science confirms that entire hidden landscapes exist under the ice, but it does not confirm the existence of lost civilizations there. Still, for many people, the very fact that so much remains buried creates enough mystery for speculation to survive. Perhaps there is no forgotten empire beneath the ice. Perhaps Tartary and Antarctica are only connected through the modern desire to search for hidden meaning inside historical gaps. But perhaps the reason these theories continue to return is because history, even when documented, always leaves certain areas open to interpretation, especially when dealing with places that few people can visit and records that few people ever examine closely. What is undeniable is that both Tartary and Antarctica have become symbols of unanswered curiosity. One represents a name that vanished from common historical language. The other represents a land still covered by silence, distance, and unanswered fascination. Together, they create a narrative powerful enough to keep people asking whether every chapter of history has truly been told in full. Now I want to hear your opinion. Do you believe Antarctica hides nothing beyond what science already explains? Or do you think some parts of the past may still remain unknown beneath the ice? Leave your view in the comments because this debate becomes even more interesting when different perspectives are shared. And if you enjoy subjects like this, involving forgotten maps, hidden theories, and mysteries that challenge conventional narratives, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications because there are many more stories ahead that continue to raise questions. History has never fully settled,